I knew something was wrong the moment my son called me. There was a pause, a hesitation like he was choosing his words carefully. Then he said it softly, almost whispering. "Mom, please don't wear anything too noticeable tonight." I stood there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, feeling something crack inside my chest. Not break, mind you, just crack. Like when you tap a glass too hard and a thin line appears, spreading slow but certain. "What do you mean, baby?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even though my hand had started trembling. "Just, something simple. Nia's parents are particular about appearances and I don't want them to get the wrong impression." The wrong impression. My son Terrence was 42 years old, successful in his own right, and he was asking his 73-year-old mother to dress down so his wife's parents wouldn't judge her. Wouldn't judge him. Wouldn't see the truth of where he came from. That was when I realized it. My own child was ashamed of me. I looked down at my worn slippers, the ones I'd had for 6 years because they were comfortable and I saw no reason to replace them. I glanced around my modest kitchen with its laminate counters and the single coffee maker I'd used since Terrence was in high school. This was the life I chose. Simple, quiet, unnoticed. But it wasn't the life I had to live. What time should I be there? I asked. 7. At Marcello's downtown. And Mom? Thank you for understanding. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The afternoon light slanted through the window, catching dust motes in the air. I thought about all the years I'd spent building something nobody knew about. All the boardrooms I'd sat in. All the decisions I'd made that affected thousands of people's livelihoods. All the wealth I'd accumulated while living like I was still scraping by. I had my reasons for the simplicity. Good reasons. Private reasons. But sitting there, hearing my son's embarrassed voice echoing in my memory, I felt something shift. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More calculating. I walked to my bedroom and opened my closet. Past the practical dresses and comfortable pants, way in the back I found the section I rarely touched. The designer pieces I'd bought years ago for corporate events. The jewelry I kept in a locked drawer. The life I could show but chose not to. Tonight I wouldn't show it either. Tonight I would do the opposite. I pulled out my oldest cardigan, the one with the pilling on the sleeves. A dress I'd worn to church so many times it had faded in the wash. Shoes that were clean but clearly worn. I would look exactly like what Nia's parents expected. A struggling elderly woman who'd somehow managed to raise a successful son despite her obvious limitations. I would watch them. Study them. Let them show me who they really were when they thought I was beneath them. And then, when the time was right, I would show them exactly who they were dealing with. I picked up my phone and made a single call to my assistant. "Marcus, I need you to pull every file we have on Parker Industries. Everything. Financial records, debt structures, lawsuit filings. I want it all on my desk by 6. "Of course, Ms. Jameson. Should I be concerned?" I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Not yet, sweetheart. Not yet. My family says this channel won't reach 1,000 subscribers. Help me prove them wrong and comment where you are watching from." As I hung up, I caught my reflection in the mirror. 73 years old. Gray hair I'd earned honestly. Lines on my face that told stories these people would never understand. They wanted to judge me by appearances? Then let the games begin. The taxi dropped me off in front of Marcello's at 6:55. I timed it perfectly. Not early enough to seem eager, not late enough to be rude. Just right on time, like a woman who had to budget even her taxi fare. The restaurant glowed against the darkening sky, all warm amber lights and valet parking. Young couples walked past me in their evening finest, laughing, their jewelry catching the light. A doorman in a crisp uniform held the door open, his eyes sliding over me with barely concealed surprise. I knew what he saw. An elderly woman in a faded floral dress and an old cardigan. Sensible shoes with worn heels. A purse I'd carried for 15 years. Hair pulled back in a simple bun with no salon styling. "Good evening, ma'am," he said politely, though his tone carried that particular kindness people reserve for those they pity. "Evening, baby," I replied and walked inside. The hostess looked up from her podium, her professional smile flickering just slightly. "Can I help you?" "I'm meeting my son. Terrence Clifton's party." Her eyes widened with recognition. "Oh, yes, of course. Right this way." I followed her through the restaurant, aware of every glance. The pristine white tablecloths. the crystal glasses catching candlelight, the soft murmur of expensive conversations. This was the kind of place where appearances mattered more than substance. Perfect. Terence stood as I approached the table, his face tight with something between love and mortification. Next to him sat Nia, my daughter-in-law of 3 years, beautiful in a navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her smile was warm but nervous. And across from them sat the Parkers. Cynthia Parker wore diamonds that caught every light in the room. Her dress was designer, her hair was salon fresh, and her makeup was applied with the precision of someone who understood that presentation was warfare. She looked at me the way you might look at a stray cat that wandered into a 5-star restaurant. Raymond Parker stood with the practiced courtesy of a man who'd learned manners mattered in business. But his handshake was brief, and his eyes assessed me like I was a balance sheet that didn't quite add up. "Mom, you remember Nia's parents," Terence said, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. "Anxiety. Maybe even fear." "Of course. So lovely to see you both again." I settled into my chair, deliberately fumbling with my old purse, letting it show its frayed edges. Cynthia's smile was carved from ice. "Loretta. What a quaint dress." Quaint. The word hung in the air like poison wrapped in perfume. "Thank you, dear. I've had it for years. I believe in taking care of things." I smoothed the fabric with hands that showed every one of my 73 years. "How economical," Cynthia murmured, exchanging a glance with Raymond that spoke volumes. The waiter appeared and I watched the performance begin. Cynthia ordered wine that cost more than I pretended to spend on groceries in a month. Raymond spoke with casual authority about vintages and regions. They were establishing dominance, marking territory. I ordered water with lemon. "Just water, Mom?" Terence asked, concern flickering across his face. "Oh, I'm fine, baby. Trying to watch my spending. Fixed income, you know." I let my voice carry just enough struggle to be believable. Cynthia leaned forward, her diamonds glinting. "That must be so difficult. Living on Social Security alone." "We manage," I said softly. "The Lord provides." Nia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Raymond's expression shifted to something almost like satisfaction. This was exactly what they'd expected. Exactly what they'd warned their daughter about, I imagined. Terence looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But me? I was just getting started. I pulled my reading glasses from my purse, old frames I'd kept specifically for moments like this. As I fumbled with the menu, I watched them all from behind those lenses. And I began to count every condescending smile, every pitying glance, every word dripping with subtle cruelty. They thought they were meeting a struggling old woman. They had no idea they were sitting across from the architect of their entire financial future. The appetizers arrived in a choreographed dance of white plates and artistic garnishes. Cynthia cut into her seared scallops with surgical precision, never once getting sauce on her perfectly manicured fingers. Raymond swirled his wine like he was performing for an invisible audience. They moved through the motions of fine dining like actors who'd rehearsed their parts too many times. "So, Loretta," Cynthia began, her voice carrying that particular sweetness that preceded cruelty, "Terence tells us you still live in that little house in Riverside." "Little house?" As if size determined worth. "Yes, ma'am. Same house I raised my boy in. Paid off the mortgage 20 years ago." I smiled, letting them see pride in something they'd consider small. "How charming. To stay in one place for so long." He paused, letting the words settle. "We've had 4 homes in the past decade. You know how it is, always upgrading, always moving forward." Raymond nodded, cutting into his steak. "Success requires adaptation. Staying in one place, well, that's stagnation." I felt Terence tense beside me. Nia's hand found his under the table, squeezing. She knew this game. She'd probably been raised in it. "I suppose different people measure success differently," I said mildly, taking a sip of my water. Of course." Cynthia waved her hand dismissively. "But you must understand we want the best for our daughter. We've given Nia every advantage. The finest schools, connections in the right circles, a trust fund that ensures she'll never struggle." The implication hung heavy. "Unlike you. Your daughter is blessed to have such devoted parents," I replied. "We certainly think so." Raymond leaned back, his confidence growing. "In fact, we've been discussing Nia and Terence's future. We think it's time they moved into something more appropriate. There's a penthouse opening in our building downtown. Terrence straightened. Dad, we've talked about this. Nia and I are happy where we are. Happy in that modest condo? Cynthia's laugh was like breaking glass. Darling, you're a Clifton. You've done well for yourself despite your humble beginnings. But our daughter deserves more than middle-class comfort. Despite your humble beginnings. I watched my son's face color with shame and anger. Watched him struggle between defending his mother and keeping peace with his in-laws. It was a terrible thing to witness, your child caught between love and humiliation. Terrence has worked hard for everything he has, I said quietly. I'm very proud of him. As you should be, Raymond agreed, his tone patronizing. It's remarkable, really. Coming from limited means and making something of himself. Though of course having the right family connections helps. Nia's introduced him to several important business contacts. The narrative was clear. Terrence had risen because of them, not despite them. Not because of his own merit or the foundation I'd given him. Cynthia turned her attention fully to me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Something that looked almost like recognition there and gone so fast I almost missed it. Loretta, forgive me for being direct, but has Terrence been helping you financially? We know it must be difficult managing on so little. There was. The kill shot dressed up as concern. My son is generous, I said carefully. But I manage just fine. Really? Cynthia's eyebrows arched. Because Raymond and I were discussing and we thought perhaps we could help. Set up a small monthly allowance for you. Nothing extravagant but enough to ease the burden. The burden? I repeated. On Terrence. And on Nia. We wouldn't want financial obligations to his mother to limit their future opportunities. The table went silent. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade. I saw Terrence's hands clench. Saw Nia's face go pale. Saw Raymond nod in agreement with his wife, completely unaware of what they'd just revealed. They weren't offering charity. They were offering to pay me to disappear from my son's life. I sat there letting the moment stretch. Letting them believe I was processing their generous offer with the confusion of a simple woman overwhelmed by their sophistication. But inside, something cold and sharp settled into place. That's very thoughtful, I said softly. Very thoughtful indeed. Cynthia smiled, triumphant. We're so glad you understand. Family is important, but sometimes love means knowing when to step back. She had no idea. No idea that she'd just confirmed everything I needed to know. And no idea that the woman sitting across from her in a faded dress was about to dismantle her entire carefully constructed world. The main course arrived and with it the performance continued. Cynthia dabbed her lips with her napkin, leaving a perfect impression of her lipstick on the white linen. You know, Loretta, I feel we've gotten off on the wrong foot over these years. We should spend more time together. Perhaps I could take you shopping sometime. Update your wardrobe a bit. She said it like she was offering to rescue a drowning woman. That's kind of you, I murmured, cutting into my chicken with hands that trembled just slightly. Not from age. From the effort of holding back what I really wanted to say. Raymond cleared his throat, warming to his role as the patriarch dispensing wisdom. The world has changed significantly, Loretta. When you were raising Terrence, things were simpler. But today's economy requires sophistication. Financial literacy. Investment strategies. I imagine so, I said. Take our portfolio, for instance. He leaned forward, completely in his element now. We've diversified across multiple sectors. Real estate, tech startups, international markets. Just last month we closed a deal that will set Nia up for generations. I watched him carefully. The way his eyes shifted when he mentioned the deal. The way Cynthia's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. The way Nia looked down at her plate, suddenly very interested in her salmon. Liars always had tells. And Raymond Parker's tell was confidence that bordered on desperation. That sounds wonderful, I said. You must be very successful. We do all right. Raymond's modesty was as fake as a $3 bill. Of course, success comes from knowing the right people. Making the right moves. Understanding that image is everything in business. Image. I repeated as if tasting the word for the first time. Absolutely. Cynthia jumped in, her diamonds catching the candlelight. People judge you within seconds of meeting you. Your clothes, your address, your car, your associations. Everything matters. Everything communicates your value. And what do you think people see when they look at me? I asked, my voice soft, curious. The question hung in the air like smoke. Cynthia's smile froze. Raymond shifted in his seat. Terrence looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Only Nia met my eyes, and in them I saw something unexpected. Apology. Well, Cynthia recovered, her laugh forced. I think people see a woman who's lived a simple life. Which is perfectly fine, of course. Not everyone is meant for grand things. Not everyone is meant for grand things. I let the silence stretch again, watching them squirm in it. Then I smiled, gentle and grandmotherly. You're probably right. I've never been much for grand things. The relief on their faces was almost comical. Exactly, Raymond said, reaching for his wine. And there's dignity in knowing your place. In being content with simplicity. Knowing your place. I thought about the emergency board meeting I'd attended 3 weeks ago. The one where we'd decided the fate of a struggling mid-sized corporation that had come to us begging for an acquisition deal. The one where I'd been the voice that said no, we won't exploit their desperation, we'll offer them fair terms. I thought about my place. The corner office on the 42nd floor. The view of the city skyline. The assistant who screened my calls. The junior executives who practically trembled when I asked them questions. That was my place. But these people didn't need to know that. Not yet. Tell me more about this deal you mentioned, I said to Raymond, leaning forward like an eager student. The one that's going to set Nia up for generations. Raymond's chest puffed up. Well, it's rather complex. Technical. I wouldn't want to bore you with the details. Oh, I don't mind being bored. I find business fascinating even if I don't understand much. He fell for it completely. For the next 10 minutes, Raymond Parker laid out his business strategy like he was teaching a child about money. He talked about leverage and assets and projected returns. He name-dropped partners and investors. He painted a picture of a financial empire built on brilliant foresight and calculated risks. I nodded along, asking simple questions that made him explain further. And with every answer he gave me more pieces of the puzzle. The company name. The timeline. The investors involved. The projected revenue streams. And slowly, carefully, I began to see the truth hidden beneath all his polished words. Parker Industries was drowning. The deal he was so proud of. It was a desperate attempt to stay afloat. The investors he mentioned. I knew 3 of them personally, and they were vultures who circled dying companies. The projected returns? Pure fantasy meant to keep creditors at bay. That sounds remarkable, I said when he finally finished. You must be very proud. We are. Cynthia raised her wine glass. To family. And to knowing where we all stand. They all raised their glasses. Even Terrence, though his hand shook slightly. I raised my water. To knowing where we stand, I echoed. And as I took a sip I caught it again. That flicker in Cynthia's eyes. That moment of recognition she couldn't quite place. She'd seen me before. Somewhere. Somehow. She just couldn't remember where. But she would. Oh, she would. Very soon. Dessert came in delicate portions that cost more than they weighed. Cynthia picked at her creme brulee with the dedication of someone who'd long ago replaced joy with discipline. Raymond had ordered the most expensive item on the menu, barely touched it, as if the act of ordering mattered more than the eating. I'd declined dessert. Watching my sugar, I'd said with an apologetic smile that made Cynthia nod with approval, as if even my health concerns confirmed her assumptions about my inferior genetics. The conversation had shifted to lighter topics, but the damage was done. The invisible lines had been drawn. They'd made their judgments, offered their charity, and established the hierarchy they needed to maintain. Now came the final act of their performance. Loretta, Cynthia set down her spoon with deliberate care. Raymond and I have been thinking about that monthly allowance we mentioned. Oh, that's really not necessary, I started. We insist. Raymond pulled out his phone, making a show of opening his banking app. Let's say $2,000 a month. That should cover your essentials and then some. Give you a little breathing room. $2,000. To them it was pocket change. Tip for the help. A small price to pay to keep the embarrassing mother-in-law at a comfortable distance. We just have one small request, Cynthia added, her smile sharp as broken glass. And there was. What kind of request? Terrence asked, his voice tight. Nothing unreasonable, darling. Cynthia turned to him, all maternal warmth. We simply think it might be better if Loretta didn't attend certain events. The charity gala next month. Our business dinners. The country club gatherings. You understand, don't you, Loretta? These are environments where appearance matters tremendously, and we wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable. Translation: don't embarrass us in front of our friends. The table went deadly quiet. I could feel Terrence vibrating with barely contained rage beside me. Nia had gone pale, her eyes glistening with tears she was fighting to hold back. Even the couple at the next table had stopped talking, sensing the tension radiating from our corner. You want to pay my mother to stay away from family events? Terrence's voice was low, dangerous. We want to make everyone's life easier, Raymond said smoothly. Your mother gets financial security. You and Nia get to build your future without awkward complications. Everyone wins. Awkward complications, I repeated, tasting each word. Is that what I am? Cynthia reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching mine, as if even that might contaminate her. You're a lovely woman, Loretta. But you have to admit you don't quite fit into our world. And that's okay. Not everyone does. We're simply being realistic about social dynamics. Something shifted in that moment. Maybe it was the casual cruelty in her voice. Maybe it was watching my son's heart break in real time. Maybe it was the 3 decades I'd spent building something magnificent while people like the Parkers judged books by their covers and measured worth in designer labels. I set down my water glass with a soft click that somehow cut through all the ambient noise. Social dynamics, I said quietly. That's an interesting phrase. It's just how the world works, Raymond insisted. Surely you understand that. Oh, I understand perfectly. I reached into my old purse, that frayed thing they'd all looked at with such pity. In fact, I understand more than you might think. I pulled out my phone. Not the cheap prepaid one I'd brought for show. My real phone. The one with the custom security encryption and the direct line to people whose names appeared in financial publications. Cynthia's eyes tracked the movement, narrowing slightly. You see, I've been listening very carefully tonight. To everything you've said. Every assumption you've made. Every judgment you've passed. I unlocked the phone with my thumbprint. And I have to admit, it's been educational. Mom, what are you doing? Terrence asked, confused. What I should have done 3 years ago, baby. When these people first looked at you like you weren't good enough for their daughter. I pulled up the file Marcus had sent me earlier. Pages and pages of financial records, court documents, and debt restructuring plans. All the ugly truth hiding behind the Parker family's polished exterior. Tell me, Raymond, I said, my voice still soft but carrying a weight that made him flinch. When exactly were you planning to tell your daughter that Parker Industries filed for bankruptcy protection 6 months ago? The color drained from his face. Cynthia's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Nia gasped. What? Or about the 3 lawsuits from former business partners claiming fraud? Or the IRS investigation into offshore accounts? Or the fact that your house, your cars, even Cynthia's diamonds, they're all leveraged against loans you can't repay? Raymond stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. How dare you? Sit down, Mr. Parker. My voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. We're not finished talking about social dynamics. And that's when Cynthia's face changed. Recognition flooded her features, followed immediately by horror. Oh my God, she whispered. You're her. You're Loretta Jameson. From Crawford and Associates. The name hung in the air like a bomb. Terrence turned to me, his eyes wide. Mom. I smiled at him, gentle and sad. Baby, there's something I need to tell you about what your mama actually does for a living. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Crawford and Associates, I said, letting each word settle like stones in still water. Senior Executive Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions. I've held that position for 17 years now. Terrence stared at me like I'd just grown a second head. But you always said you worked in administration. Filing. Data entry. I do work with files and data, baby. Just not the way you imagined. I turned my attention back to the Parkers, who looked like they'd seen a ghost rise from the grave. And about 6 years ago, a small manufacturing company came across my desk. Parker Industries. Remember that, Raymond? His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. The company was struggling, I continued, my voice carrying the weight of every boardroom I'd ever commanded. Bad investments. Worse management. Creditors circling. You were about to lose everything your father built. Cynthia's hand trembled, her diamonds catching the light like falling tears. That investor. The anonymous one who bought 40% of our remaining assets. That was me. I let the words sit there, simple and devastating. I saved your company, Cynthia. Used my own money, not the firm's. Restructured your debt. Bought you time. Gave you a chance to rebuild. You couldn't have, Raymond sputtered. That investor put in $3.2 million. You're just what? A poor old woman in a faded dress. I leaned back in my chair, finally letting them see the steel beneath the softness. That's the problem with people like you, Raymond. You think appearance equals reality. You think because I live simply that I am simple. Nia's voice was barely a whisper. You own part of my parents' company? 42% now, actually. The restructuring agreement included growth clauses. I pulled up another document on my phone. Which means every business decision they make, every major expenditure, every partnership deal, it all comes across my desk for approval. The implications crashed over them like a wave. That gala next month? I continued. The one you don't want me attending? I'm the keynote speaker. The charity is one I've supported for 15 years. They're honoring me with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Cynthia made a sound like a wounded animal. The country club you mentioned? I've been a member for 12 years. I just never use it because I find the people there exhausting. Too concerned with who's wearing what and who drove which car. I paused. Though I suppose my Tesla is parked in the garage most days. I prefer taking taxis. Better for thinking. Terrence dropped his head into his hands. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to build your own life, baby. Not live in my shadow. Not have people question whether your success was yours or mine. I reached over and touched his hand. And I wanted to see who really loved you for you. Not for what they thought you could give them. I turned back to the Parkers and my voice went cold. But you do. You looked at my son, at the man I raised, and you saw someone beneath you. Someone who needed elevation through your daughter's connections. You offered me money to disappear from his life like I was some beggar on the street corner. We didn't know, Raymond tried weakly. No. You didn't ask. You assumed. You judged. You built your entire sense of superiority on a foundation of ignorance and prejudice. I pulled up one more file. And while you were busy judging me, your house of cards was collapsing. I turned the phone so they could see the screen. Bank statements. Foreclosure notices. Collection agency letters. All the desperate financial measures they'd been hiding from their daughter. The penthouse you want Terrence and Nia to move into? You don't own it. You're 3 months behind on the rent. I scrolled through the documents. The business deal you bragged about. It fell through 2 weeks ago. Your investors pulled out when they realized you'd been cooking the books. Nia covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Daddy. And those diamonds Cynthia's wearing? I nodded at the necklace that had caught so much light tonight. Cubic zirconia. Very good quality, I'll give you that. But fake nonetheless. You sold the real ones 8 months ago to cover payroll. Cynthia's hand flew to her throat, clutching the necklace like it might transform into genuine stones through sheer will. Everything about your life is a performance, I said quietly. A desperate show meant to convince the world you're still the successful couple you pretend to be. And you had the audacity to look at me, at my simple life and honest work, and call it less than. The silence that followed was broken only by Nia's quiet sobbing. Raymond tried one more time, his voice cracking. We were protecting our daughter. Trying to secure her future. By lying to her? By building her life on false expectations. I shook my head. You weren't protecting Nia. You were protecting your own egos. Your own desperate need to be seen as important. I stood slowly, gathering my old purse. The entire restaurant was watching now, not even pretending to look away. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice carrying the authority of 3 decades of executive decisions. Tomorrow morning, you're going to sit down with your daughter and tell her the truth. All of it. The bankruptcy. The lies. The fake lifestyle you've been maintaining. And if we don't? Cynthia asked, her voice breaking. Then I'll do it for you. Along with every financial institution you still owe money to. I can make things easier for you, or I can let nature take its course. I paused. Your choice. I turned to Terrence, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been awe. Baby, I'm sorry I kept this from you. But I'm not sorry for who I am or what I've built. And I'm not sorry for showing these people that respect isn't something you buy with designer clothes and country club memberships. I kissed his forehead just like I used to when he was small. Then I walked toward the exit, my worn shoes clicking softly on the marble floor. Behind me I heard Raymond's voice, desperate and small. Wait. The check. I didn't turn around. It's already paid. I called ahead hours ago. And in that moment they finally understood. Everything tonight had been under my control from the very beginning. The night air hit my face like a baptism as I stepped outside Marcello's. My phone buzzed before I'd even reached the curb. Marcus, my assistant, his timing impeccable as always. Ms. Jameson, the files you requested earlier, there's something else. Something that wasn't in the original reports. I walked slowly toward the taxi stand, processing everything that had just happened. Inside that restaurant, my son was probably trying to understand how his entire world had shifted in the span of one dinner. What did you find? Cynthia Parker. Before she married Raymond, her maiden name was Cynthia Whitmore. She worked at Crawford and Associates 30 years ago. Junior analyst in the same department where you started. I stopped walking. 30 years ago. When I was fighting my way up from the bottom. When I was the young black woman in a sea of people who looked like the Parkers, who spoke like them, who had grown up with their advantages. Keep going, I said quietly. She was there when you presented the Morrison account strategy. The one that should have gotten you promoted to senior analyst. Marcus paused. According to the old records I dug up, she's the one who told management you'd stolen the research from another department. The memory came flooding back. The accusation. The investigation. The way they'd looked at me like I was exactly what they'd expected me to be all along. Thief. Fraud. Someone who didn't belong. It had taken me 2 years to clear my name. 2 years of fighting while watching other people, less qualified people, climb the ladder I'd been pushed off of. She destroyed your career trajectory, Marcus said. Set you back years. And then she left the company 6 months later to marry Raymond Parker. She knew who I was, I whispered. At dinner when she kept looking at me. She was trying to figure out if I remembered. Do you want me to add this to the file? I thought about it. About revenge and justice and the difference between the two. About the young woman I'd been, crying in a bathroom stall because her integrity had been questioned. About the decades of work it took to rebuild what Cynthia Whitmore had tried to tear down. No, I said finally. This stays between us. For now. Because this wasn't about old wounds anymore. This was bigger. A taxi pulled up and I climbed in, giving the driver my address. As we pulled away from the restaurant, I saw Terrence burst through the doors looking for me. He had his phone out, probably trying to call. I let it ring. He needed time to process. Time to understand that his mother wasn't the person he thought she was. That she was more. That she'd always been more. The taxi wound through downtown, past buildings where I'd made deals that shaped entire industries. Past the Crawford and Associates Tower where my name was on the wall of senior executives. Past the life I'd built in secret and silence. Rough night? The driver asked, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. Illuminating, I replied. My phone buzzed again. Not Terrence this time. A number I recognized immediately. David Crawford himself, the CEO and founder. At 10:30 on a Saturday night. Loretta, I just got a very interesting call from Raymond Parker. His voice carried amusement and something darker. He's threatening to file a complaint about conflict of interest. Claims you've been using your position to sabotage his company. And what did you tell him? I told him that if he'd like to make an official complaint, he's welcome to schedule an appointment with our legal department, where they'll remind him that every action you've taken regarding Parker Industries has been documented, justified, and ultimately saved his company from complete dissolution. David paused. Want to tell me what really happened tonight? I gave him the abbreviated version. The dinner. The insults. The revelation. When I finished, David was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, actually laughed. Loretta Jameson, in 30 years I've watched you navigate boardrooms like a chess master. But this might be your finest work. They offered to pay me to stay away from my own son. And you responded by reminding them who actually holds the power. His tone shifted, becoming serious. The Parker situation is going to require delicate handling. We can't be seen as predatory even if they brought this on themselves. I know. I'm not trying to destroy them, David. I'm trying to teach them something about humility and truth. That's why you're still my best executive after all these years. You understand that real power isn't about crushing people. It's about showing them a better way. He paused. Monday morning, let's discuss a formal restructuring plan for Parker Industries. One that gives them a genuine chance to rebuild, if they're willing to be honest about their situation. Thank you. Don't thank me. You saved that company with your own money. You've earned the right to guide its future. He chuckled again. Though I do wish I could have seen Raymond Parker's face when you revealed who you were. After we hung up, I stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. Somewhere behind me, my son was learning that his mother had lived a double life. That the woman who'd raised him on simple meals and thrift store clothes could have given him anything money could buy. But money wasn't what I'd wanted to give him. I'd wanted to give him character. Integrity. The understanding that worth wasn't measured in designer labels and country club memberships. The taxi pulled up to my small house in Riverside. The porch light was on, casting warm yellow light over the garden I'd tended for 40 years. My neighbors' houses stood quiet in the darkness, filled with people who knew me as the nice lady who brought cookies to block parties and never made a fuss. None of them knew about the other Loretta. The one who decided the fates of companies and held power that would make the Parkers weep. And that was exactly how I liked it. I paid the driver with cash and a generous tip, then walked up my familiar path. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The worn furniture. The old photographs. The life I'd chosen despite having the means for so much more. My phone buzzed one more time. Terrence. Mom, please call me. We need to talk. I don't understand any of this. I don't understand you. I sat down in my favorite chair and finally called him back. Baby, I said when he answered, his voice thick with emotion. Let me tell you a story about a young woman who learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people underestimate you. Terrence arrived at my house at 7 the next morning. I'd been awake since 5, sitting in my kitchen with coffee and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. The same kitchen where I'd made his school lunches. The same table where he'd done homework while I worked on acquisition reports he thought were grocery lists and church newsletters. He knocked softly like he was afraid of disturbing a stranger. It's open, baby, I called. He came in looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shirt wrinkled. Nia followed behind him, mascara smudged, still wearing last night's dress under Terrence's jacket. They both looked like survivors of a natural disaster. Which I supposed they were. Sit, I said, gesturing to the chairs. I made breakfast. Terrence stared at the simple spread. Scrambled eggs. Toast. Orange juice. The same breakfast I'd made him 1,000 times growing up. Mom, I don't want breakfast. I want answers. You can have both. I set plates in front of them. Eat. Then we'll talk. Nia picked up her fork with trembling hands. Miss Jameson, I didn't know about any of it. My parents, they told me the business was thriving. They said we were expanding, that everything was better than ever. I know, sweetheart. That's the problem with lies. They don't just hurt the people being lied to. They hurt the liars too because they have to keep building bigger lies to cover the small ones. I poured her coffee. How are they this morning? Not good. She wiped her eyes. After you left, my father tried to order more wine. His card was declined. Then his backup card. Then my mother's card. The restaurant manager had to come over and it was horrible. What happened? I asked gently. You'd already paid, Terrence said, his voice hollow. The manager explained that Loretta Jameson had called ahead and covered the entire bill, including a 30% tip for the staff. I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. We went back to their house, Nia continued. And they finally told me everything. The bankruptcy. The lawsuits. The fake jewelry. The fact that they've been living on credit for 2 years, just trying to maintain appearances. Her voice cracked. They mortgaged their house 3 times. The cars are leased and they're behind on payments. Even the furniture, Mom, even the furniture is rented. I'm sorry you had to learn the truth that way, I said. Are you? Terrence's question came out sharp, angry. Because it seems like you orchestrated the whole thing. Let them insult you, humiliate you so you could drop the hammer at the worst possible moment. I set down my cup and looked at my son, really looked at him. At the hurt and confusion swimming in his eyes. You're right, I said. I let them show me exactly who they were. I gave them every opportunity to treat me with basic human kindness, and they chose cruelty instead. I could have stopped it at any time. Could have told them who I was the moment we sat down. Then why didn't you? Because you needed to see it too, baby. You needed to see how they really felt about you. About where you came from. About me. I reached across the table, but he pulled his hand back. They didn't just insult a poor old woman. They insulted everything you built. They credited your success to their daughter's connections, not your hard work. They measured your worth by their standards and found you lacking. That doesn't give you the right to humiliate them like that. His jaw clenched. You destroyed them in a public restaurant. Everyone was watching. People were recording on their phones. By tomorrow, it'll be all over social media. Actually, it won't. I pulled out my phone, showing him the security footage from Marcelo's. I spoke with the owner this morning. A good man, owns 3 restaurants downtown. We've done business before. He's already confiscated any footage and asked guests to delete their recordings. Privacy concerns, potential lawsuits, that sort of thing. Terrence stared at the phone. You thought of everything. I've been doing this a long time, baby. Planning. Strategizing. Protecting what matters. I leaned forward. And what matters most is you. Always has been. By lying to me? His voice rose. By letting me think you were struggling? Do you know how many times I've laid awake worrying about you? Wondering if you had enough money for groceries? Feeling guilty about my success because I thought you were barely getting by. The pain in his words cut deeper than any insult the Parkers had thrown. I never lied to you, I said quietly. I just didn't tell you everything. There's a difference. That's semantics, Mom. That's lawyer talk. He stood abruptly, pacing my small kitchen. You let me live with guilt and worry for years. Years. When you could have. Could have what? Given you money? Bought you things? Set you up in a fancy condo so you never had to struggle? I stood to, my voice firm. That's not who I am, Terrence. That's not how I was raised, and it's not how I raised you. But why keep it secret? Why not just tell me you were successful? Because the moment I did, everything would change. People would look at you differently. Look at us differently. You'd never know if someone wanted to be your friend because of you or because of what they thought you could give them. I moved closer. I wanted you to build your own life. Earn your own respect. Know that your success was yours. Nia spoke up softly. She's right, Terry. If I'd known, everything would be different. How? He demanded. Because I would have told my parents, she whispered. And they would have treated her completely differently. Not because she deserved it, but because of what she could do for them. And we never would have seen who they really are. The truth of it settled over the kitchen like dust after an explosion. Terrence sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. This is too much. All of it. I don't even know who you are anymore. I knelt beside him, my old knees protesting, but I didn't care. I'm the same woman who sat up with you when you had nightmares. The same woman who taught you to tie your shoes and ride a bike. The same woman who worked 3 jobs, yes, 3 real jobs back then to keep a roof over our heads. I touched his face. I just grew. Evolved. Built something bigger than either of us. But I never stopped being your mama. 3 jobs. He looked up. You always said 2. Data entry at Crawford during the day. Night classes to get my MBA. And weekend consulting on the side. I smiled. That's how I got noticed. My weekend consulting work impressed someone important. They brought me into the firm full-time and I started climbing. Why didn't you tell me when you got promoted? When you started making real money? Because by then you were in high school. Forming your identity. I didn't want you to change who you were becoming. I sat back on my heels. And honestly, I liked our simple life. Still do. This house, this kitchen, these memories, they're worth more to me than any mansion or country club. Nia wiped her eyes. What happens now? To my parents. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 73 years. That depends on them. I meant what I said last night. They need to tell you the truth, all of it. And then we'll figure out a path forward. You'd still help them? After everything they said to you? I'm not helping them for them, sweetheart. I'm helping them for you. Because like it or not, they're family now. I poured more coffee. But there will be conditions. Honesty, humility, and genuine effort to rebuild their company the right way, not through smoke and mirrors. Terrence finally looked at me, really looked at me. You planned all this. Every step. Most of it, I admitted. Though I hoped they'd surprise me. Hoped they'd show a shred of decency. And if they had, then we'd be having a very different conversation this morning. One where I quietly introduced myself as someone in their industry and offered to help without the drama. I sat back down. But they didn't. They chose cruelty. And sometimes people need to face consequences before they can face themselves. My phone buzzed. A text from Cynthia Parker. Please. Can we talk? Just the two of us. I need to tell you something I should have said 30 years ago. I showed it to Terrence and Nia. Are you going to meet with her? Nia asked. I thought about the young woman I'd been. The one Cynthia Whitmore had betrayed. The years of rebuilding. The long road to forgiveness I'd walked alone. Yes, I said. But not because she asked. Because it's time some old ghosts were put to rest. Cynthia Parker sat in my living room like a penitent in church. She'd arrived at noon alone without the armor of designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Just a simple dress and flats, her hair pulled back, makeup minimal. She looked older in daylight. Tired. Human. I'd sent Terrence and Nia home an hour earlier, telling them I needed to handle this part alone. Some conversations required privacy, especially ones that reached back 3 decades. Thank you for seeing me, Cynthia said, her voice small in my modest living room. Her eyes traced the worn furniture, the family photos on the wall, the life I'd built in simplicity. You said you had something to tell me. Something from 30 years ago. I poured tea into mismatched mugs, the kind you collected from church fundraisers and grocery store promotions. I assume you're talking about the Morrison account. Her face went pale. You remember. I remember everything, Cynthia. Every detail of that investigation. Every person who looked at me like I was a thief. Every door that closed because you told them I'd stolen research that was mine. I handed her the tea. What I don't remember is why. We barely knew each other. I'd never done anything to you. She took the mug with shaking hands. That was exactly the problem. You'd never done anything and yet you were everywhere. In every meeting, every presentation, every conversation about who was rising through the ranks. She looked down. I'd worked at that company for 3 years. 3 years of playing the game, networking, doing everything right. And then you showed up, this young black woman from nowhere with no connections, no pedigree, and suddenly everyone was talking about you. So you destroyed me because I was good at my job? I destroyed you because I was terrified. Her voice cracked. Terrified that everything I'd been taught about how the world worked was wrong. That maybe effort and intelligence mattered more than breeding and connections. That maybe I wasn't as special as I'd been told my whole life. The honesty of it caught me off guard. The Morrison account strategy was brilliant, she continued. Everyone knew it. And I knew if you presented it, you'd skip right past me. You'd get the promotion I'd been working toward for years. So I told management you'd stolen the research from the archives. That you'd plagiarized from an old proposal. Why would they believe you? Because I looked like them. Talked like them. Came from the same country clubs and prep schools. She met my eyes. And because some part of them wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe that you couldn't possibly be that good on your own. I sipped my tea, letting the bitter truth settle between us. It took you 2 years to clear your name, Cynthia said. 2 years of fighting while I got promoted to the position that should have been yours. And then I met Raymond at a company event. He offered me an escape from the guilt. A new life where I could pretend I hadn't sabotaged someone's career to protect my own mediocrity. You've been carrying this for 30 years? Every single day. Tears spilled down her cheeks. And last night when I realized who you were, when I saw what you'd become despite what I did to you, it all came crashing back. You should have been executive vice president a decade ago. You should have had the corner office, the recognition, everything. But I stole years from you. Yes, I said simply. You did. She flinched like I'd struck her. But here's what you didn't steal, Cynthia. You didn't steal my intelligence. My work ethic. My integrity. My ability to rebuild. I set down my tea. You knocked me down and I got back up. Stronger. Smarter. More determined. So in a strange way you made me better. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, it doesn't. Nothing excuses betrayal. I leaned forward. But I've spent 30 years building a life I'm proud of. And I refuse to let your guilt become my burden to carry too. She wiped her eyes. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Probably not. But forgiveness isn't always about deserving. Sometimes it's about releasing yourself from the weight of someone else's choices. I paused. I forgave you years ago, Cynthia. Not because you earned it, but because holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and expecting you to die. Then why humiliate us last night? Why expose everything in front of our daughter and your son? Because forgiveness doesn't mean accepting disrespect. It doesn't mean allowing you to repeat the same patterns with a new generation. My voice hardened. You looked at my son the way people looked at me 30 years ago. You measured him by his background instead of his character. You offered to pay me to disappear because you still believe worth is measured in designer labels and country club memberships. You're right. She set down her mug. Raymond and I, we built our entire identity on appearances. On being seen as successful, important, better than others. And when the money started disappearing, we couldn't let go of the image. We mortgaged everything, borrowed from everyone, destroyed our financial future, all to maintain a lie. Why? Because without the money, without the status, who were we? She laughed bitterly. We were just two mediocre people who'd been told we were special our whole lives. And facing that truth was terrifying. I stood and walked to my window, looking out at my simple garden. You want to know the real difference between us, Cynthia? It's not money or success or intelligence. It's that I learned early on that my worth had nothing to do with what other people thought of me. You're still learning that lesson at 65. What happens now? To Raymond and me? To Parker Industries? I turned back to her. That depends. Are you finally ready to be honest? With yourselves, with Nia, with the people you owe money to. I don't know if we can survive honesty. If we tell everyone the truth, we'll lose everything. Our reputation, our social circle, whatever dignity we have left. You lose the fake version of those things. The performance you've been exhausting yourselves to maintain. I sat back down. But you might gain something more valuable. The chance to rebuild as your real selves. To discover who you actually are when you're not pretending to be something you're not. Cynthia was quiet for a long moment. Raymond wants to fight you. He's talking about lawyers, about challenging your ownership stake in the company. He's welcome to try. But he'll lose, and it'll cost him what little he has left. I know. She looked at me with something like hope. Is there another way? There's always another way. But it requires humility, transparency, and accepting help without trying to maintain the illusion of control. I pulled out my phone. Monday morning, you and Raymond will meet with my team at Crawford & Associates. We'll create a genuine restructuring plan. One based on reality, not fantasy. And what will that cost us? Your pride. Your pretenses. Your need to appear superior to everyone around you. I met her eyes. Can you afford that price? She was silent, staring at her hands. The hands that used to wear real diamonds. The hands that had signed the lies that destroyed my reputation decades ago. Finally, she nodded. We don't have a choice, do we? Everyone always has a choice, Cynthia. You just have to decide who you want to be. The woman who destroys others to protect her false sense of superiority? Or the woman who finally faces herself and does the hard work of becoming someone worth knowing? She stood slowly. I know what I said 30 years ago can never be undone. But I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I believe you. I walked her to the door. And Cynthia? One more thing. Yes. You ever look at my son with pity or condescension again? You ever suggest he's not good enough for your daughter? And I will use every bit of power I have to finish what bankruptcy started. Are we clear? The steel in my voice made her step back. Crystal clear. Good. Then I'll see you Monday morning. 9 sharp. Don't be late. After she left, I stood in my doorway watching her drive away in a car that wasn't really hers, back to a life that was crumbling faster than she could rebuild it. My phone buzzed. Terrence. Mom, Nia's parents just called. They want to have dinner tonight. All of us together. They say they want to apologize properly. I thought about it. About second chances and hard truths. About the difference between revenge and restoration. Tell them yes, I said. But this time we're eating at my house. And I'm cooking. Your house. But Mom. But nothing, baby. If they want forgiveness, they can sit at my simple table and eat my simple food and see that real value has nothing to do with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I could hear the smile in his voice. You're something else, you know that? I'm your mama. That's all I've ever needed to be. After we hung up, I walked back into my kitchen and started pulling out ingredients. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread. The meal I'd made 1,000 times in this kitchen, the one that had nourished my son through childhood. Tonight it would nourish something else. Not revenge. Redemption. They arrived at 6 o'clock exactly on time. Raymond and Cynthia stood on my porch looking like they'd aged a decade overnight. No expensive car idling at the curb, just an Uber pulling away. No designer clothes, just simple outfits that probably came from their own closets, from back when they didn't need to perform every moment of their lives. Come in, I said, holding the door wide. The smell of pot roast filled my small house, mixing with cornbread and the faint scent of the lavender sachets I kept in the linen closet. Terrence and Nia were already in the living room, sitting close together on my worn couch, united in their uncertainty about how this evening would unfold. We gathered around my kitchen table, the one with the mismatched chairs I'd collected over 40 years. The one where Terrence had done homework and I'd paid bills, and we'd shared countless meals that cost less than the wine the Parkers had ordered last night. I served the food on plates that didn't match, using silverware from 3 different sets. No performance. No pretense. Just food and family and truth. Raymond cleared his throat. Loretta, we owe you an apology that goes beyond words. Then don't use words, I said, passing the mashed potatoes. Show me. Show your daughter. Show my son. Cynthia reached for Nia's hand. Baby, your father and I have built our entire life on a lie. And in doing that, we taught you that appearances matter more than character. That status matters more than integrity. We failed you, Raymond added, his voice thick. We gave you everything except the one thing you actually needed. The truth. Nia's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you just tell me? I would have understood. I would have helped. Because we were ashamed, Cynthia whispered. Ashamed that we couldn't maintain the life we'd promised you. Ashamed that we were ordinary people pretending to be extraordinary. I watched them, these broken people trying to rebuild something they'd demolished through pride and fear. And I thought about the young woman I'd been, the one who'd been knocked down and had to claw her way back up. Shame is a choice, I said quietly. So is honesty. So is change. Raymond looked at me. Why are you helping us? After everything we said to you, everything we implied about your worth and your son's worth, why would you extend this grace? I set down my fork and looked around my table. At Terrence, my son who'd finally seen his mother's full story. At Nia, a young woman learning that love required truth. At the Parkers, facing the ruins of their carefully constructed lies. Because 30 years ago someone showed me grace when I didn't deserve it. After I'd been accused, investigated, humiliated, a senior executive named David Crawford called me into his office. He'd done his own investigation. Found the truth. And instead of just clearing my name, he offered me a position in his department. Gave me a chance to rebuild. I paused. He told me something I've never forgotten. He said, real power isn't about crushing people who've wronged you. It's about showing them a better way to be. Is that why you live like this? Terrence asked softly. In this house with old furniture and simple things? When you could afford anything? Partly. But mostly because this life reminds me of what matters. Not the size of your house or the price of your clothes. But the people you share meals with. The integrity you maintain when no one's watching. The character you build when life knocks you down. I smiled at him. I wanted you to learn those lessons too, baby. Not through my lectures but through living them. Raymond wiped his eyes. We'll sign whatever papers you need on Monday. Accept whatever terms your team proposes. We just want a chance to rebuild honestly. I know. Cynthia told me. I passed the cornbread. But here's what I need more than signatures. I need you to understand that my son isn't beneath your daughter. He's not lucky to have married into your family. If anything, you're blessed that a man of his character chose to love Nia despite seeing how you treated others. We know, Cynthia said. We know that now. And I need you to understand that wealth and status are temporary. Character and integrity last forever. You can lose everything you own, every dollar, every possession, every connection. But if you have your character intact, you can rebuild. Without it, you're just empty people with empty lives no matter how much money you have. The table fell silent except for the quiet sounds of eating. Simple food shared with complicated people, building something new from the wreckage of old wounds. After dinner, after the dishes were washed and put away, after apologies had been spoken and accepted with the understanding that words were just the beginning of real change, I walked everyone to the door. Terrence hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Not for the money or the success. For this. For showing them mercy when you could have destroyed them. I learned from the best," I whispered. "Now go home with your wife and build the life you deserve." As they drove away, I stood on my porch in the warm evening air. My phone buzzed one final time. David Crawford. "Loretta, I heard about your dinner party tonight. You're still teaching people about grace after all these years." "Someone had to learn it from you first," I replied. "Fair point." He paused. "The Parker restructuring is going to be complicated. They're in deeper than even you realize." "I know. But complicated doesn't mean impossible." "No, it doesn't. That's why you're the best at what you do." He chuckled. "Though I do think it's time you considered taking my position when I retire. The company needs someone who understands that real leadership is about elevation, not domination." I looked at my simple house, my quiet street, the life I'd chosen. "Let me think about it." After we hung up, I sat on my porch swing, the one Terrence had helped me install 20 years ago. The moon was rising over the neighborhood, casting silver light on ordinary houses filled with ordinary people living extraordinary lives in their own small ways. Tomorrow I would go back to being Executive Vice President Loretta Jameson. Back to the boardrooms and the decisions that shaped industries. Back to the power and influence I'd built from nothing. But tonight I was just Loretta. A 73-year-old woman who'd learned that the greatest victories weren't about crushing your enemies. They were about showing everyone, including yourself, that grace and strength could exist in the same moment. That real power whispered instead of shouted. That the simplest life could hold the deepest truths. And that sometimes, the best revenge was simply becoming the person others thought you could never be, then using that position to teach them something about the kind of human they could become too. I smiled, rocking gently in the warm night air, feeling the weight of 7 decades of living settle around me like a comfortable blanket. The Parkers would rebuild or they wouldn't. That was their choice. But they would never again underestimate a woman in a faded dress who chose simplicity over spectacle. Because they'd learned the hardest way possible that appearances were just that. Appearances. And the truth? The truth was always more powerful than any lie money could buy. I stood and walked inside, ready to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to teach and lead and show grace. But tonight belonged to the quiet satisfaction of a lesson well taught. And in my simple kitchen with its worn counters and mismatched dishes, I poured one last cup of tea and whispered a prayer of gratitude. For the struggles that made me strong. For the betrayals that taught me wisdom. For the simple life that kept me grounded. And for the chance to show the world that true power had nothing to do with crushing others and everything to do with lifting them up, even when they didn't deserve it. Especially when they didn't deserve it. Because that's what grace looked like in real life. Not a weakness, but the strongest force in the world. Thank you for being here. If this story touches you, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to comment where you are watching from. Your support means a lot to me.